All right, ready to shake things up a bit?
I'm ready. Always up for a challenge.
Great, because today we're throwing out the typical business advice.
Sounds intriguing. What are we diving into?
A book that kind of flips the script on how we think about work.
Okay, I'm all ears.
It's called Rework.
Rework. Got it. Who's the author?
It's by 37 Signals. They're a software company.
I've heard of them. Aren't they known for being a little, different?
You could say that. They've built this really successful company, but they kind of ignore a lot of the traditional rules.
And their point is that we can too.
Exactly.
That's pretty bold. So what's their secret?
Well, one of the first things they tackle in Rework is this whole real-world excuse.
Yeah.
Like, oh, that's a great idea, but it wouldn't work in the real world.
Oh, yeah, I've definitely heard that one before, and probably even used it myself.
It's like this invisible barrier people put up when they're afraid to try something new.
Makes sense. It's easier to stick with what you know, even if it's not working that well. But 37 Signals, they're living proof that the real world isn't a barrier, it's an excuse.
Right.
I mean, think about it. They have a fully remote team, no traditional salespeople, and they're still quashing it.
So if they can do it, maybe we're all limiting ourselves more than we realize.
It makes you wonder what else is possible if we stopped letting that real-world excuse hold us back.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it ties into another idea Rework talks about.
Okay, what's that?
The idea that actually success breeds success.
Interesting. That's not what we usually hear. It's all about failing fast, failing often, right?
Yeah, but Rework flips that on its head.
Okay, so they're saying we should actually be studying our successes more than our failures.
That's the idea. They argue we learn more from what we do right, and there's actually research to support this.
Really? Tell me more.
So a Harvard Business School study found that entrepreneurs who'd already had one successful company were more likely to succeed with their next venture.
So it's not just luck. It's about learning from those previous wins.
Makes you think, maybe instead of dwelling on what went wrong, we should be spending more time analyzing what went right. Like, what decisions did we make? What were the key strategies that contributed to that success?
Find those patterns and apply them to new projects. It's like building on a solid foundation.
Okay, so we're challenging the real world and we're learning from our wins. What other conventional wisdom is Rework ready to dismantle?
Well, brace yourself because this one might seem counterintuitive.
Oh, I'm intrigued.
Rework is a huge believer in the power of constraints.
Constraints, like limitations.
Yep, exactly. Whether it's time, money, or resources, Rework argues that those limitations can actually be a catalyst for creativity and innovation.
How so? I usually think of constraints as, well, constraining.
Well, think about it. When you have unlimited time and money, it's easy to overthink things, get bogged down in unnecessary details, maybe even get a little lazy.
Makes sense?
But when you have constraints, you're forced to prioritize, make tough decisions, and come up with creative solutions.
So it's about working smarter, not harder.
Right. Rework is full of examples of companies that thrived because of limitations.
Right.
Like Craigslist. They basically took over the classified ad industry.
And they did that with, what, a super simple website?
Yeah, just a basic website and a really small team. They had limited resources, but they made it work. And look at the Drudge Report. One guy running a website, and it had a massive impact on the way people consume news.
Wow, that's a great example.
And Southwest Airlines. They made a big decision to only fly Boeing 737s. Seems limiting, right?
Yeah, you'd think so.
But it actually streamlined their operations, kept costs down, and they're still one of the most successful airlines.
So limitations can actually be a competitive advantage.
That's the idea.
Okay, so if we embrace those constraints, see them as opportunities, maybe they can be a springboard for innovation instead of a roadblock.
Love that.
Now, this next concept from Rework really spoke to me personally. It's about building what you need.
Scratching your own itch, they call it.
Yeah, exactly. It's this idea that instead of trying to guess what the market wants, you should focus on building something you personally want or need, something that solves a problem you're actually facing.
Makes a lot of sense. I mean, if you're passionate about solving that problem, you're going to be way more motivated to find the solution.
And the book has some great examples, like 37 Signals. They built their own contact management software, HighRise, because they needed a better way to manage their own contacts.
Of course. And James Dyson, he was tired of vacuum cleaner bags clogging, so he invented the bagless vacuum. Problem solved.
And think about Vic Firth, the guy who created those drumsticks. He was a professional timpanist, needed better drumsticks, so he started making his own.
And now his company is a legend in the music world.
All these iconic products, all born from someone trying to solve a problem they were experiencing.
It's inspiring, isn't it?
Totally. Okay, so we've got constraints we can leverage, and we're building something we're passionate about. What's next?
Well, this one might sound a little controversial.
Oh, I'm ready for it. Hit me.
Rework says to create something truly innovative, you need to be willing to say no.
No. You mean like saying no to too many projects or clients that aren't a good fit?
Yeah, that too, but Rework takes it a step further.
Okay, explain.
They advocate for saying no by default. It's about protecting your vision, staying laser focused on what matters.
So it's about saying no to distractions, to trying to be everything to everyone.
Think about it, like ING Direct. They offer way fewer products than traditional banks, but by saying no to complexity, they've built a super successful business.
So sometimes less is more. It's about making those tough choices, staying true to your vision, even if it means saying no to opportunities that seem good on the surface.
It challenges that whole "the customer is always right" mentality. Sometimes you have to say no to protect the integrity of what you're building.
Great point. Okay, we're saying no, we're focused. Where do we go from there?
Well, Rework has this really interesting idea about building an audience instead of buying attention.
I'm not sure I follow.
So they're saying instead of pouring money into advertising, you should focus on creating great content, building a community, and fostering that organic growth.
So it's about attracting people who are genuinely interested in what you have to offer.
Exactly. It's a long game, for sure. But in the end, having that loyal audience is so much more valuable than just buying fleeting attention.
Makes sense. And they've proven it with their own blog, Signal versus Noise.
Right. Over 100,000 daily readers just from sharing their thoughts on design, business, all that stuff.
Okay, so that's their model. But how do we apply this building an audience idea in the real world?
Rework says we can learn a lot from chefs. Think about it.
Okay, chefs.
They're constantly sharing their recipes on TV, in cookbooks, online.
True. It seems counterintuitive, right? Giving away their secrets.
Right, but they get it. They understand that sharing their knowledge doesn't devalue them. It actually makes them more valuable.
And businesses can do the same thing.
Absolutely. Don't be afraid to teach others what you know. Create valuable content. Share your insights. Engage with your audience. It's about building those relationships.
So instead of hoarding information, we should be sharing it. Be more transparent.
Which brings us to another Rework strategy, going behind the scenes.
Okay, what does that mean exactly?
Give people a glimpse into how things work. Show them the process behind your product, the inner workings of your business.
Like those How It's Made shows.
Exactly. People love those shows. Even if it's something super ordinary, it's fascinating to see how it's made.
Makes me think of that show Unwrapped on the Food Network.
Perfect example. And when businesses do that, when they're willing to pull back the curtain, it builds trust.
So we're being transparent about our processes, about who we are.
Instead of trying to project this image of perfection, we're showing our flaws, our humanity.
Which makes us more relatable, more authentic.
Right. So we're challenging those real-world limitations. We're learning from our successes. We're embracing constraints.
We're building what we need, saying no, building an audience, sharing our knowledge, going behind the scenes.
And we've only just scratched the surface of Rework.
I can't wait to see what else they have to say.
Oh, wait.
Okay, so back to Rework. In part one, we covered some pretty big picture stuff, like embracing constraints, building an audience.
Right, kind of setting the stage.
But Rework isn't just about these big abstract ideas. There's tons of practical advice too.
Yeah, that's what's so great about it. It's not just like think differently. They actually give you concrete strategies.
Totally. Like one thing they emphasize is identifying the epicenter of your business.
The epicenter. Okay, what's that?
So it's about finding that one essential element, that core thing, that if you took it away, your whole business would like crumble.
Ah, I see. The heart of the matter.
Exactly. They use this example of a hot dog stand. The hot dog itself, that's the epicenter. Everything else, toppings, location, branding, all secondary.
So it's about stripping away all the extras, getting down to that one thing that truly makes your business your business.
For a software company, it's the software. For a writer, it's the words.
Makes sense. Find your epicenter, and then what?
Well, then Rework says, start with good enough.
Good enough, not perfect.
Nope. Don't get hung up on perfection right away. Just get something functional out there, then iterate, refine as you go.
I like that. It's like, don't let perfection be the enemy of progress.
Exactly. It goes back to those constraints we talked about. Sometimes having limitations, like a tight deadline, forces you to be more efficient, creative.
Like having to come up with a solution on the spot? No time to overthink it.
I remember when I was starting out as a writer, I'd get stuck trying to craft the perfect opening sentence. It was paralyzing. Finally, I realized just get something down, even if it's not perfect, and then go back and refine it later.
Way less pressure.
Totally. And Rework has this great example about this.
Yeah.
When they launched their flagship product, Basecamp, they didn't even have a billing system in place yet.
Wow, that's bold.
But they knew getting the product out there was the priority. They had like a 30-day window to figure out the billing, but they made it happen.
So they shipped it and then figured out the details later.
Yep. Embrace those constraints, make it work.
It's a good reminder. Prioritize action over perfection.
Okay, so we've launched, we're getting feedback, now we need to actually get things done.
Yeah, nitty-gritty.
And Rework has some pretty strong opinions about productivity, especially meetings.
Oh, everyone's favorite topic.
Right. They actually call meetings toxic. They say they can drain productivity, kill creativity.
I mean, I've definitely been in some meetings that felt like a total waste of time.
Haven't we all? And Rework points out, often there's no clear objective. They go off topic easily. Too many people who don't really need to be there.
So what do they suggest? No more meetings.
Well, not necessarily. But they do advocate for a much more intentional approach, like set strict time limits, only invite essential people, have a clear agenda, and if possible, hold the meeting at the site of the problem, so you're actually dealing with it directly.
So instead of just talking about it, you're actually there seeing the problem firsthand.
Exactly. It's about being focused, action-oriented.
Yeah.
And this whole idea of eliminating distractions is a big theme in Rework. Like, they talk about the importance of having uninterrupted time for focused work.
Deep work, right. No multitasking.
Yeah, and they suggest, designating certain hours of the day as no-talk periods, minimizing interruptions like email, phone calls, and using asynchronous communication whenever possible.
It's so hard these days, though. Everyone expects you to be constantly on.
I know, but Rework argues that carving out those blocks of uninterrupted time where you can really focus is ultimately more productive.
I'm sure they're right. Okay, external distractions are one thing, but what about those internal ones?
Oh, you mean like those massive to-do lists?
Yeah. Exactly. Sometimes I look at mine and just feel completely overwhelmed.
Rework has some good advice for that, too. They say break those long lists down into smaller, more manageable chunks.
Bite-sized pieces.
Right. Short lists are less daunting and more motivating. When you cross something off a short list, it gives you a sense of accomplishment.
Momentum.
Exactly, which fuels your productivity.
Love that.
And Rework also talks about the importance of making small decisions whenever possible. They argue that big decisions can be paralyzing, hard to change. But small decisions, you can make those quickly, you can reverse them if needed, and it allows for more experimentation.
So be agile, flexible. It reminds me of that saying, ready, fire, aim.
And this ties into their approach to dealing with competition. Don't get caught up in what everyone else is doing. Just focus on your strengths, what makes you unique.
Don't try to be a copycat. Be the original.
And throughout Rework, there's this consistent message of questioning everything, challenging the status quo.
Yeah, they're not afraid to go against conventional wisdom. They question everything, from traditional hiring practices to the 9-to-5 workday.
I think their ideas about work-life balance and company culture are particularly interesting.
Like that send people home at 5 thing.
Yeah, that one definitely raised some eyebrows. But their point is that when people have a life outside of work, they're actually more productive and engaged when they are at work.
Makes sense. When you're not burnt out, you have more energy, more creativity.
It's about recognizing that work is just one part of a fulfilling life.
And Rework really pushes this idea of building a company culture that values balance, well-being.
Totally. It's not just about working harder, it's about working smarter and living a full life.
And that leads us to some more Rework wisdom.
Okay, so we're back for the final part of our deep dive into Rework. We've covered a lot, but there's one more area I kind of want to dig into.
What's that?
How Rework approaches, like dealing with the tough stuff.
Yeah.
The inevitable challenges every business faces.
You mean like setbacks, mistakes, the not-so-fun stuff?
Exactly. And a lot of businesses, they try to avoid these topics, sweep them under the rug. But Rework takes a completely different approach.
They actually encourage businesses to be upfront about their mistakes.
Really? So instead of trying to hide them or spin the narrative?
Nope. Own it. Be transparent about what happened. Take responsibility for making things right.
Which, I gotta say, can be tough to do. Especially when, there's this pressure to always appear perfect.
I get it. Nobody wants to look bad. But honestly, when a company messes up, What's better, some generic PR response or a genuine apology that acknowledges the impact of the mistake?
A genuine apology for sure. That shows you actually care, builds trust.
And Rework even has a whole chapter dedicated to the art of saying you're sorry.
Okay, so how do they break that down?
Keep it simple, be sincere, be specific about what went wrong, and most importantly, focus on what you're going to do to fix it.
So no vague apologies or passing the blame?
Exactly. Take ownership and show you're committed to making things right.
Makes sense. Now, that ties into another interesting concept from Rework, putting everyone on the front lines when it comes to customer feedback.
Okay, what do they mean by that?
So it's about breaking down those silos between departments. You know how usually it's just the customer service team dealing with complaints?
Yeah, kind of like a buffer.
Right. But Rework says, expose the whole team, developers, designers, everyone, to customer feedback, good and bad.
Interesting. So everyone has a direct connection to the customer experience.
That way, everyone understands the impact of their work, the good and the bad.
Builds empathy.
Right. And it creates a shared responsibility for making sure the customer is happy.
Which ultimately leads to a better product, a better experience for everyone.
Okay, so now let's talk about company culture. Because Rework has some pretty radical ideas about that too.
You're probably thinking about the send people home at 5 philosophy.
Yeah, among other things. That one definitely got my attention. I mean, is that even realistic in today's world?
It might sound crazy, but their argument is that when people have a life outside of work, they're actually more productive when they are working.
I mean, I can see that. When I'm feeling rested and recharged, I'm definitely more focused.
Exactly. And Rework challenges a lot of other workplace norms too, like the obsession with hiring these rock star employees and the tendency to overhire.
So what do they suggest instead?
Build a team of solid people who are passionate about the work, but also have lives outside of work. Give them autonomy. Trust them to make decisions.
Less bureaucracy, more freedom.
That's the idea. Empower people to do their best work without micromanaging them.
Sounds like a pretty ideal work environment.
It definitely goes against a lot of traditional thinking, but that's what Rework is all about, challenging the status quo, finding new ways to work.
And as we wrap up our deep dive, one thing that really stands out to me is Rework's emphasis on finding joy and meaning in work. Like building something you're proud of, something that makes a difference, you know?
Yeah, I love that. Work doesn't have to just be a paycheck. It can be something you're actually excited to get for in the morning.
Exactly. It's about creating a business that aligns with your values.
And having fun along the way. That's a big part of it too.
Totally. I think that's what I'm going to take away from Rework, the importance of questioning everything, being bold, having the courage to build a business that truly reflects my vision.
I love that. For me, it's their emphasis on simplicity, focus. You know, with everything going on in the world, it's easy to get distracted.
So true.
Rework reminds us to strip away the unnecessary. Focus on what truly matters.
Well said. This has been such a great deep dive. I hope it sparked some new ideas for our listeners, maybe even inspire them to rethink how they approach their work.
Yeah, Rework is definitely a thought-provoking read.
If you're looking for a fresh perspective, a roadmap for building something unique and fulfilling, definitely check it out.
You won't regret it.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive, and we'll see you next time.